Welcome. My name is Nick Flitterman. I am Managing Partner and Head of Telecoms at Portland Advisors, and also a member of the SSPI UK Advisory Board. I've been advising on satellite and space projects for over 20 years. I'm delighted to be able to moderate today's session on the UK space landscape, a force for disruptive change. This webinar is part of the GVF and Satellite Evolution Group highly acclaimed webinar series, this time in association with SSPI UK. But it does feel like great timing to be having a session on the UK space landscape, with the UK government this week publishing its first ever national space strategy, in which it sought to lay out its plans, in the Prime Minister's own words, to put the UK in the front rank of the global space industry. We'll explore the strategy in a bit more detail, get the panelists' initial views on its goals and ambitions, as well as looking more widely at the current activity in UK space. So without further ado, let me just introduce our panelists today. Heard from myself. We have Mark Garnier. He's the Member of Parliament for Wyre Forest and also Vice Chair of the Parliamentary Space Committee. We have Chris McLaughlin, Chief of Government Regulatory and Engagement at OneWeb. Gary Wade, Principal Engineer of Future Ground Systems and Transformative Programme at the Satellite Applications Catapult. And last but certainly not least, Anthony Baker, who is CEO of Satellite View. I'll let the panelists introduce themselves a little more, and then Mark has kindly offered to share some opening remarks on UK space before we then go into the discussion itself. Perhaps we'll just start off with Anthony's introduction.
Thank you very much, Nick. Very happy to be here, and thank you for the organisers. So Satellite View is an Earth observation company that's going to launch a satellite with a unique sensor in thermal imagery, so we can measure the heat output from any building on the planet. And this is going to help with the global challenge of finding where we're wasting all our energy. We have been supported by the UK Space Agency, ESA funding, and venture capitalists based in the UK. Thank you.
Thanks, Anthony. Gary.
Thank you, Nick. Very pleased to be here as well. It's Gary Wade. I'm from the Satellite Applications Catapult, one of 9 catapults that are part government funded and involved with research and development. My background mainly is in ground segment over the last sort of 20 years.
Thanks, Gary. Chris?
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everyone. Chris McLaughlin from OneWeb. I've worked in the space industry, I suppose, now for the last 20 years, and in tech for another 10 years before that. I was working last year extremely hard with UKSA and with UK civil servants to bring OneWeb back from its Chapter 11 demise when COVID stopped the final 2 billion of funding coming into the company. And I've been actively involved in its return, the raising of 2.7 billion of new equity with no debt. And to date, 322 satellites successfully launched, most of those since we came back. So if there's anything disruptive, it's OneWeb. Lovely to meet you all.
Thanks, Chris. Get the plug in OneWeb early. I like it. And Mark, over to you.
Thank you, Nick. So I'm Mark Garner. I'm a member of Parliament for Wyre Forest and the vice chair of the all-party space group. But I think it's also worth probably just pointing out that I have 1 or 2 commercial interests in the space sector. I chair the advisory board on the Shetland Space Centre, and I'm a non-executive director of the Satellite Finance Network. And Nick, you've asked me to sort of quickly give a quick overview of where we are with everything in UK space. And I think, of course, you raised very, very importantly very early on that on Monday the government published the National Space Strategy, which brings together all of the government's ambitions for space. And it's worth bearing in mind that we already knew that the government did have an ambition for space, and that came out a number of years ago with the industrial strategy. And the government's intention was always going to be to try to take 10% of the global space market, which was estimated at the time to have a gross value added of around £40 billion a year. That's the UK's share by 2030. Now, interestingly, the position of the UK in the global space race, if you like, actually slipped behind during the course of the last few years since that industrial strategy was published. And it's been sort of slightly disappointing. The government slightly lost its way. So I think it's great that we've seen this national space strategy published, and it's actually a very, very interesting document. It starts off by giving a very good overview of what the space industry means in the UK. It currently employs around 45,000 people. The gross value added is about 16.4 billion to the UK economy, but it's worth bearing in mind that space underpins about 360 billion pounds worth of GVA or economic activity in the UK, and that compares with an economy of around 2 trillion pounds. So it's about sort of 18% or so of our economy. But of course, we all know that actually space is really integral in everything we do. The PNT systems on satellites actually verify every financial transaction in the UK. So arguably, you could say that space is one of the most important things for the UK, over and above everything else in terms of what it provides. It's very good, this space strategy. I think it's very, very strong on intent. It's talking about growing the economy and levelling up the economy across the country. It's by saying that, it's not only looking for economic growth, but also one of the key government policies to level up the economy where we have weaknesses in the economy. It's looking at our global Britain values. This is all the post-Brexit issues that we're looking at. We're going to take Britain to the rest of the world as Britain by itself rather than part of the European Union. And it talks about how we can do that in the space industry. It talks about the great science that we do here in the UK. We've got a lot of good universities that are producing a lot of very, very good science. And it also talks about using space to deliver. So I think the document itself brings together an awful lot of stuff that was already known, I think, but it's very, very strong on promoting that ambition. But inevitably, there are a few buts. The first but is that the space strategy refers to other things to come. And whilst it talks quite a lot about how the government will help fund the space economy, what it does refer to is that we need to see what comes out in the spending review that the Chancellor of the Exchequer will be delivering on the 29th of October. So we've got to wait for the spending review to get details of where the money is coming from and any tax changes that may be made to promote the space industry. We've also got the defence space strategy. So this is the Ministry of Defence coming out with its own strategy. And again, we're expecting that next month. That could be tomorrow, but it could be in 30 days' time. And then the third strategy, which is still to come, is the severe space weather strategy. And again, we're waiting for that to come out. So we've still got quite a lot more coming out, which is going to give us more, if you like, flesh on the bones in order to understand really what's going on. But I suppose there are a couple of things where, I've been talking to a lot of people within the space industry, trying to find out what their views are. And by the way, I'm very, very interested in what the views are of the audience listening in today. But I think there are a couple of things which I suppose give me slight cause for concern. It's not nothing particularly to worry about, but just I think where the government needs to be a bit more clear on. The first is who's in charge. At the end of the day, when you look at this document, there are three forwards. One is from the Prime Minister, who of course is chairman of the National Space Council, which is a cabinet office organisation. That's great. We would expect to see the Prime Minister there. But then we've also got a forward from Kwasi Kwarteng, who's a very, very, very smart Secretary of State for the Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. And certainly from the commercial point of view of space, that's where the lead will come from a commercial point of view. But we've also got a forward from Ben Wallace, who's the Secretary of State for Defence. So again, we've got sort of three people coming into this. So I kind of really want to know who's really in charge of this space strategy. And it's worth bearing in mind as you read through the document that there are a number of different organisations. Just to give you an idea, you've got 8 government departments. You've got BEIS, Ministry of Defence, Foreign and Commonwealth Office, Department for Transport, Department of International Trade, Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. We've got the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, and of course we've got the Cabinet Office. That's 8 government departments who have got something to contribute to this. And then of course we've got the UK Space Agency and UK Research and Innovation. So it's not entirely clear how this is going to be delivered, although I suspect the UK Space Agency will be the main body pushing this through, as we expect. I think the second point is people are sort of saying that this is great. We're really pleased that we've got this strategy coming through. It's got a lot of, as I say, a lot of ambition. It's got a lot of enthusiasm. I think it's really underpinning the government's ambitions. But where's the granularity? How do we access all of this? Where do we get that? Where do we find that help? you know, as I say, almost certainly UK Space Agency, and I'm very pleased to see that Paul Bate has taken over. Paul Bate is well known as a change manager, so I think he's going to be putting, you know, not to overuse the pun, but he's going to be putting rockets under the UK Space Agency. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. But this is good. Everything looks brilliant, but we need, I think, just a little bit more to really understand where it is. And bear in mind, you know, I used to be a trade minister. When we go out as ministers pitching for business for the UK around the rest of the world, we need to take with us our pitch book. You know, this is everything that anybody who's doing any sales around the world. This is our pitch book. We've got to ask ourselves, has it got enough granularity on it to make it easy for our ministers and our representatives to be able to sell the UK space industry around the world? As I say, it's brilliant so far, but I think it can go a bit further. Nick, back to you.
Oh, that's great. It's a really good, some good insight, Mark. Thank you very much for giving us your views. Interested to hear the rest of the panel's views, actually. So I had some similar thinking. A great start, showing some great ambition. But do we think this strategy really is the thing to put the UK in the front rank of global space industry, as the Prime Minister himself puts it? Chris, what are your thoughts?
So first unmute, and that's always a good thing to do, isn't it?
Yeah.
I have to say, I really think the government's getting its act together, which is an unusual thing to say at the moment. The focus that has gone about with OneWeb since last year has been amazing. No one would have thought that the British government would get their head together and save an asset of this nature and then put so much time and effort into it. We've seen extraordinary support from UKSA, from UKGI, from the National Strategic and Security Investment Fund. We've seen BEIS stepping up, FCDO stepping up, Defence beginning to understand what OneWeb can do for it. We are getting amazing support from ambassadors around the globe in certain key countries where we're beginning to operate into. And what we're seeing is a very integrated response. It's almost surprising. I almost can't quite believe that we're doing it, but we are. I've had calls this morning with 2 different countries, both of which were backed by our own efforts on a diplomatic basis and also on a technical basis. We get fabulous support from UK Space Catapult as well, who are doing a great job for us. The UK is actually beginning to understand that it has a real growth opportunity in space. I think OneWeb has been catalytic for what it's aiming to do. And I think that this space strategy, not least because we feature in it 6 times and we're the only company mentioned, but I had to put that plug in as well, Nick, beginning to understand that it's all about the future. It's all about the new industries, the 4th industrial age, space. You know, when folks first said to me last year, well, yeah, OneWeb, what's the point? It's not about the satellites now. It's about the position in space, the spectrum, the ability to fly satellites and the ability to generate next innovations. We've got to go with a fresh move forward. And what I've seen in the space strategy is a will to do that. Yeah, we don't have all the answers, but a real will to do that.
Okay, thanks, Chris. So Gary, perhaps from the government agency perspective and your involvement to date in the UK space, perhaps you could give your perspective as to how you see this, the positives and perhaps some of the learning things, and build on what Mark and Chris have said.
Yeah, I think thanks, Chris, for the shout out there for the catapult, and it's nice that we're actually named in the document as well. So that's good on the delivery side. I think I'd like to agree with Mark and Chris entirely on it. It's great to have a space strategy. We've all been in the industry for a while. Chris and myself, 20+ years, and finally people know what we're doing. So I think that's come, love them, hate them, from the likes of Elon Musk and the likes that sort of made space fashionable. And it's great to see that our government's really getting behind us to help us move forward. We've got some great SMEs, some great larger companies in the UK that really have been working in, little parts here and there, but making a big impact globally. So I think having this sort of space strategy behind us and looking for new space is certainly a great opportunity, and something I think that we'd all benefit from.
Okay, great. And Anthony, Talking about SMEs, Gary, perhaps your perspective might be slightly different. You're reading it, it's missing the granularity, as Mark mentions, perhaps not enough on finance for early stage businesses. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm very disappointed we weren't personally mentioned in the document. But besides that, it is, on the upside, it is a good place to go to document to see what the strategy is. Been a lot of talk around it. So it's good to see that from the government and some direction and leadership. You're right, that there isn't the detail on the financing. It'll be good to see the comprehensive plan coming out in next week, 29th. But how that filters down to companies like us is not clear. There was some mention of some of the UK Space Agency's programs, the National Space Infrastructure Programme. But it's hard as a startup to know where to go first. The Catapult helps, Space Agency helps, but when you get the initial project, 50K, but how do you scale from there? I mean, it's good that OneWeb showed one way of getting large funding, but we're in the middle and we're sort of lost.
Understood. So you're looking for a bit more help, I guess, and wondering in what direction to get there. And I guess, Mark, as you suggested, with so many of the government departments listed as being part of the delivery of this strategy, can we really believe? It is very promising and it's a great start, but can we really believe such cross-departmental coordination is going to happen to get us over the line in the time frame described? Government's not got a great track record in this sector, although it means well. What do you think about that? And you mentioned it yourself as a bit of skepticism.
I think the government's really got to work quite hard on this. I mean, I think when we look at all the various different departments, I mean, as you go through them, BEIS is an enabler of the business element of the whole thing of this. But the Ministry of Defence is acting both as a customer of satellites and also as a defender. So kind of what the Space Command is going to look like. Department for Transport through the Civil Aviation Authority is the licensor of space flight activities, whereas the DCMS, Cultural Media and Sport, is a licensor of Spectrum. So you've got lots and lots of different departments that are bringing things together. The Department of International Trade is a promoter of it in terms of taking it overseas. The Cabinet Office in theory brings it all together. But what it does do, and certainly when I was a minister, we found there was a problem. We used to go and have ministerial space meetings, and there were 12 ministers would turn up to it, and of course we'd sit there and read out our prepared document and then push off, and we're all trying our best to do it, but we're all being pulled in lots of different directions. And what you need is one person who really is going to take control of this and start promoting it. And at the end of the day, if you don't get that, you get this confusion that Anthony has highlighted. Is you need to know where that customer service is happening from. Anthony needs to know who he can pick up the telephone to, who will then point him in the right direction and make sure he's being looked after. And as I say, it could be the Catapult, it could be the UK Space Agency, but even the fact that we're sort of questioning which is which is in itself sort of slightly problematic. So I think that the government's, it's kind of 2/3 of the way there. It's now the detail, and as I say, we just don't know if we're going to, when we're going to get that detail on the administrative side. As I say, we've got these other bits coming up. But it's that delivery detail that we need to have, and they're going to have to get this right.
Sure, Gary, what you want to add something?
Sorry. Firstly, Anthony, yes, after this meeting, give me a shout, and we'll see if we can help a bit. But I really wanted to sort of look at all these departments. I think Department of Transport interested for future transport. So for autonomous vehicles, space is going to be very important. Obviously, there's the timing, our sovereign timing, ENT, which is very important to all aspects. And I think it's great to have all those government organisations interested in space. But I agree with Mark, we need some sort of focus to say this is the department that's really pushing that forward at the high level. And then obviously the likes of the UK Space Agency and ourselves and others to then sort of deliver that. But someone to take ultimate control would be good to see.
Thanks, Gary. Chris, you wanted to add?
If I may, I think the structure is reasonably well understood. We have the National Space Council, which is chaired by the PM, and which has the Secretaries of State involved on it. So it provides a platform at the highest level. The defence and the civil side of space are headed by two individuals, Air Vice Marshal Harv Smith and by Rebecca Everden, who are both very used to working with each other and will bring those two strands together, which is why it's so important to have both Ben Wallace and Kwasi Kwarteng jointly signing up to the strategy, because the two things are interrelated. And UKSA, through Paul Bate and Ian Annett and the team there, are very much becoming the facilitating delivery agency, rather than the sort of policy background. And so the bones are there to actually make things happen. The financing side, I absolutely agree with Anthony. It's very, very tough. Anthony, this time last year, we were trying for a COVID loan, and look what happened. So have faith. But the thrust overall is in good shape. There are people there that want to help, and I think that you'll find that with 8 different departments now being asked by the PM, what are you doing about space? There will be 8 opportunities, and their ministers below them and their civil servants below them, with whom to put forward your pitches. And Mark's absolutely right. It's hard to navigate through, but with people like Mark available and Parliamentary Space Committee available there as well, there are numerous ways to get in. Not easy, and of course the UK Space Trade Body as well does a good job pushing, but a lot of ways to get in, and a lot more, I hope, money coming.
Okay, great. And so we've had a few questions from the audience already, and we'll get to those shortly. And just a reminder to put those questions in the Q&A section rather than the chat. I see there's one question in the chat section, so if you could just copy that and paste that in, that would be great. I do want to go sort of expand the discussion beyond the strategy document itself shortly. But before we do that, I wonder whether what the panelists think is for the government that's sort of low-hanging fruit, if you like, in terms of the things that it can do quickly once all a bit more information is out in terms of funding available and the way it's going to proceed. To, I guess, give confidence in its space strategy, to go beyond the ambition and the intent and into the delivery of the actions. What's the low-hanging fruit here? It may be, obviously we have a whole value chain in the space industry in the UK. It's great from small businesses to OneWeb and beyond. But what can the government do to help at all levels, actually, and how can we see actions, if you like, in the short term? I don't know who wants to have a go at that first.
I'll stick my mitt up for. Oh no, Mark, you go ahead. Sorry.
Go on, Mark, you go.
Well, look, there's a couple of things. The first is one single shop, well-funded shop, probably the UK Space Agency or the Catapult, but that's the customer service centre where you can go straight to that, and that has probably a lot more funding. But look, the one very, very simple thing they can do, and I've submitted some papers on this, but that is in the finance side of things. And sometimes I think we need to think slightly obliquely about how we can do really well in certain areas. And I look back to the great Gordon Brown. You'll be surprised to hear, as a Conservative Member of Parliament, lauding up a former Labour Prime Minister and Chancellor. But what Gordon Brown did for the UK film industry was phenomenal. And what he did was he created tax breaks to allow people to invest into the UK film industry. And as a result of that, we went from a film industry that was massively in decline to one that has produced, the Harry Potter series, James Bond, all this kind of stuff. So wonderful films. What we can do, a very, very low-hanging fruit, is we can create some tax breaks that generates a space finance hub within the City of London. The City of London is the world's greatest financial centre. We can deploy, with not much legislative change, and it certainly wouldn't cost very much either, we can create a space finance hub, and that would generate a massive commercial space finance centre with all the expertise you need in one place if you want to take a business from sort of stage A financing all the way through to public listing.
Okay, Chris, you're going to add?
I was going to say that what we can do is sprinkle some more stardust and excitement, because the one thing Elon Musk has brought is pixie dust to the whole thing. And that pixie dust has got people fired up and interested right the way down to school kids and STEM and the whole approach to what you do and how you want to go about things. And so if there were one thing to do next year, I would hope it will be a launch from the UK, whether that be a Cornwall or a Scottish launch, that it will be something which will capture imagination and which will enable all elements of our industry to speak to our media with multiple voices and one voice and say, look at what we're doing. You were talking about the connected car, the smart motorway, the fact that you can't get from A to B, you can't find your broadband, whatever. There are numerous things that are going to be solved through space because they can't be solved otherwise, and they'll be solved by the innovators in Britain. If we thought our pharma industry was good, our space industry is every bit as good as well, and we're finding our voice. So I'd like a launch to sprinkle pixie dust on the industry. So
it's about publicity, is what you're saying, Chris. And I think there's a question here we have. I think you can see the question that actually the suggestion that the things that Richard Branson, Elon Musk, and Jeff Bezos are doing are seen by the majority, if you like, as billionaires playing with space, which is perhaps giving negative publicity, if you like, and it's exciting the minority, but giving negative publicity to the majority. So is that a fair suggestion? And if so, how can the government turn that sort of stance around to and actually convey the messages that actually space as an industry can help everyone, the majority, as you suggest?
So it's in the value, isn't it? It's in the what are we doing with space? So, Branson, yeah, okay, great, but he's a great showman. Musk, oh, he's full of fluffy stuff, except he can launch a rocket and land it back on the pad, refurbish it 10 times and use it 10 times successfully. So love him or hate him, that is amazing. Bezos, well, where do all those cardboard boxes come from every single day? What level of space connectivity is needed to get those aircraft flying around the globe, dropping things off? What will be needed from the drones that you're going to have as commonplace in the next 5 or 6 years? When schools are benefiting from connectivity that they could never have dreamt of, where's it coming from? We did it actually back in Gordon Brown's day. I remember that my one contribution to that Labour document was the name, which was called the Case for Space. And we made the case for space back then, and we need to make the case for space constantly. And colleagues here and others in the industry, I don't want to push it too far, but perhaps Gary would pick up on why we need to be making the case for space.
Perhaps Gary can come back to that, but Anthony, you wanted to add.
Yes, I think if the government were an anchor customer for the space industry, they could address some of the national challenges to do with climate change, to do with connectivity. There's a lot of things that that space data could be used for, and I think certainly for scaling companies like ourselves, if we have an anchor customer to help us out, I think it would give credibility abroad. We talk to customers abroad, and they said, "Well, why haven't you sold it to your own government before you sell it to us?" So I think that people will appreciate that British technology is helping British problems to keep us ahead.
Okay, thanks, Anthony. Mark, you were going to add as well?
Well, I think it's a very, very important question, because ultimately we're going to see, kind of with Chris McLaughlin and OneWeb, we saw quite a significant investment into a business that was basically to be seen as failing. And a lot of my constituents don't understand why we bought it. I mean, I'm helping Chris in the background, trying to get all this sort of stuff done. And I think part of the problem with space is, we got we're amongst friends here, and we've got an audience of people who are keen on space. But I think for the average person on the street, it's really quite dull, and there's not much to it. They're kind of aware of it, and when they look at their mobile phone, they're trying to find where the nearest pub is or the nearest post office is on their sat nav. They're kind of aware that there are satellites, but it's kind of, it doesn't mean a huge amount of sense to them. And Chris is absolutely right when he talks about what people like Elon Musk are doing in terms of that sort of incredibly advanced technology. But I think Ultimately, for most people, they look at space as being very, very spectacular takeoffs. If my generation, the Saturn V rockets, for kind of people who are slightly younger, of the space shuttle, and this is kind of manned endeavor into space. And I think part of the problem is that people see space as being that, rather than as something which is pretty functional. So I think that we need really two things in order to really, really get the public engaged in this. First is that we need to deliver on the space strategy's ambition of being the first vertical launch site in Europe. And that is most likely to be from Shetland. I'll declare my interest. I chair the advisory board of the Shetland Space Centre. But it is, the Pathfinder launches, which is going to be delivered by ABL, which is a division of spin-off from Lockheed Martin. That is due to happen next year. And I think that to be able to see a rocket launching from UK sovereign territory, from UK ground, is going to be pretty fantastic. I think the second thing is that we really need to make the most of people like Tim Peake. These are British people who've been into space, and I think the more people that we can get into space, the more ambassadors we can have who can go around and and deliver this to schools. I met Tim Peake when he was doing it. On the other side of the screen on my laptop that I'm looking at the moment, I've got Tim Peake's mission, that sticker which he gave me. I'm going to give a load of them to my kids. I nicked one of them for my computer. This is something which I think is really inspirational, and having those ambassadors are going to make a difference. But it's the rockets and it's the individuals that are going to make the difference to the UK population, I suspect.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of questions. I'll just pop them up, sort of related to publicity and sort of a lack of understanding amongst the wider population as to what the UK space landscape looks like, what it is we do. Do we build stuff? Is it services? It sounds like there's a part to accompany this strategy document, which does have a fair amount of information in it about what exists. There needs to be some sort of campaign, do you feel like, to explain why investment in the industry is so key to everything we do and what it is we do in the UK. The economy is suffering all over the place. We can see that. This week, the attention is all over where's all the petrol and on the queues, and in the meantime we've got this space strategy being announced. So it's about the government. Is it about the government managing its own publicity, making people aware of the critical nature of the space industry and what we do here and what we can do better to inject to help economic growth and to benefit the whole population? You've got views on that. Gary, why don't you start?
Sorry to make sure I'm muted. Yeah, I think it's our space industry is one of the world's best kept secrets. We have a fantastic industry in the UK, and those that are in it, people on the panel here and in the audience are all mainly part of that. But outside of that, it's not really known. And I think that's one of the reasons I'm quite excited about the space strategy and the fact that what excited me was seeing at Stansted Airport the shuttle on the back of the 747. That's as close I got to it back in the 80s, and that excited me. And although there's a lot of negative publicity around the billionaires going to these places and people saying, well, leave them there, it's still exciting the world. And I think it's been likened to the lunar landing and the fact that it is exciting people in space. We're certainly in our CTO team, we're seeing a huge influx at the moment of young talent, very diverse talent, out of universities, doctorates, master's degrees, rather than us that have been in the industry for a very long time. So I think it is starting to ignite, that sort of thing. And it would help if, the government and all the organisations here try their best to sort of keep that momentum going in keeping the publicity up, really. Yeah.
Chris, go on.
Well, I mean, Portland are past masters at all of this as well. I think of your founders; they were very good at all that sort of thing. The thrust is this: the United Kingdom is now the world's second largest operator of satellites. The United Kingdom has Skynet 5, Skynet 6 in operation at the moment, providing it with military capability. The United Kingdom has got 2 aircraft carriers, along with a battle group, that are going to be sailing around the world promoting not just defense power, but also soft power for us. They've got to be connected via something. Our banks, our roads, our health systems have all got to be kept resilient. A little thing called timing that Gary and co are working on for us at the moment is critical. Nobody thinks of timing, it's just you watch until all the water systems don't work, the sewage doesn't work, and the traffic lights have stopped working. Why? Because some malign operator has succeeded in corrupting GPS or temporarily jamming it just to show what they can do. So all of these things there, something that we talked about many years ago and didn't do, was not just making the case for space, but also making the case for a day without space. What would society be like if space went away for a day? And if we could articulate that, and there's no reason why we couldn't, there's enough bright people to do this, people might begin to understand. Of course, the most disappointing thing about space is that you put several $1 billion up beyond the clouds and you forget all about it. The nice thing about it is it just seamlessly works along the way. And where we fail, I think, is to remind people that this is delivered by satellite. You know, your SATCOM in the car is via satellite. Who does those satellites? The UK. How? Well, the UK is the 4th largest contributor to the European Space Agency, regardless of what Thierry Breton thinks. We're an absolutely critical part of the European, in its widest traditional sense, existence for the satellite industry. We need to make the case much more aggressively. And I think as we have the successes that everyone here and elsewhere represents, you know, as we have the space rocket engine, as we have the first capability to vertical launch, all those kind of things build us into, oh, we're quite good at this, really. I mean, I have on my desk my inspiration, which is the TSR-2 aircraft that got scrapped. And I bought a model of the TSR-2 to inspire myself last year on the basis that we were not going to go down that route again. And it kind of reminds us that we give up an area far too easily. And the challenge for us all in the UK now, and part of the space strategy, is to draw a line in the sand and say, we're done now. Now it's down to Britain. And I think it's quite exciting for everyone, and certainly for the youngsters coming up, to see that there's a real and vibrant industry that wants their talent from wherever they come from to be the best in the world.
And talking of world, and you've mentioned Europe, and I guess what we don't cover it here because this space strategy is really about the UK and its position. But I'm wondering what the panelists think about whether the success of in our country and the success of this strategy will also be tied to our relationships overseas with the EU, with other countries, a bit like the OneWeb story, where you certainly attracted investment from several different regions of the world. What do we think about the impact of Brexit on UK space and our relationships? And it's sort of touching on one of the questions from the audience as well. Is there an intention to work alone or work with allies overseas, as you have done, Chris? So I'll come back to you, Chris. You've had a few things to say, but I don't know whether. Well, Anthony, I know you said yourself you're talking with overseas customers. But what do we think about relationships overseas post Brexit, and how that might impact our ability to deliver on this strategy?
I didn't think too much. The supply chains are affecting some construction in the UK, but they're affecting everybody. So I don't think that's probably a temporary blip. I think the great thing about having the UK as an anchor, it's a great place to do business. It is great for startups. The Catapulters and Harwell are a great place to start. And OneWeb's shown that you can scale and create a huge business in the UK. So I think everything's there in place, and the government now has a policy. Government can help certainly with export contacts, and here I'm encouraged that Chris has said that they've had plenty of help. I don't think it's been too much of an issue, really. I think it's funding's been a little bit more challenging than the west coast of the USA, but we're a lot better than anywhere else. So I think that's a positive. I see that if we have a strong base here where we can conduct a strong business, we'll be right for exporting in the rest of the world. And we've had interest from all continents of the world for our data set.
Okay, Gary, come on, over to you.
Yeah, obviously, European Space Agency, and we're still part of that, and that will continue, which I think people were immediately nervous about when the vote went that way and Brexit. But I think it's led to industry, government, and certainly ourselves looking further afield, and going, well, okay, like the Australian space bridge, look back to our Commonwealth partners. There's strength there and bringing together. And certainly the moment, as you can see in sort of Arab Spring area, they're looking at when do we not need, very topical this week, I guess, when do we not need fuel? What are they going to do and how are they going to sustain their sort of wealth? And several countries there are looking at, space. It's a great growth market. It's exciting. Let's invest into there. So I think, there's a lot of interest globally, and I think Brexit has almost made us look a little bit outside of our comfort zone. At other previous and completely new areas to partner.
Chris, did you have a view? You're on mute.
Oh, yes, no, I'm sorry about that. I do actually. I think Brexit's represented a major opportunity for us to get our sort of head out. I mean, what I've seen is the opportunity levels at a Commonwealth level, at a Five Eyes level, at a strategic level are enormous. And there's great respect for UK space capability. So freed of the need to go through European procurement type activity, we can open ourselves out to the new opportunities from Asia and beyond. We can look to Australia, for example, and we can say, what do you need? What do we need? How do we do things? I mean, there was WGS, which was the last attempt for all the Five Eyes to try and do something, and UK didn't participate. Either stands for wideband global satellite, or as one of the Australian generals once told me, we got screwed. So there's a real need out there, and apologies to everybody, but there's a real need out there to have space capability, but space capability that countries can rely on. And so from a perspective of who's out there, well, the UK is actually very, very trusted to do the right thing, trusted to stand by contracts. Mark is a great expert in the trade area and such. Like, he may want to add something to why we're trusted and why UK law is so important. But all I'm seeing is people coming to us, including French and Germans, and saying, if we wanted to do this, have an alternative to Galileo that was on a LEO, for example. If we wanted to have a more resilient process to do X, Y, or Z, can we still do that with you? And the answer is, yeah, we're up for it. Are you up for it? And I got asked, well, what's the effect on Brexit, Chris? As well, it's only a divorce, isn't it? The truth is, once they've agreed who got the car, who got the children, who got the houses, who got the paintings, and who gets the holidays, you've still got to get on with each other. And they'll still be on the other side of the channel. And the reality is that all the parties know they want to work together. The European Space Agency loves working with the UK. UK loves working with the European Space Agency. Our satellites are built by Airbus. Our launches are done by Arianespace. Our two key technology people come from Italy. So the reality across the space industry is that we are already European. We just had a divorce, but we still got to get on with each other.
You agree, Mark?
Yeah, although I can remember once as a minister getting told off for referring to the word divorce. It was I made a joke that the Department of International, in fact it was David Davis, who was a Brexit minister, was like the divorce lawyer, and the Department of International Trade were about the sort of what happens afterwards and the great way going forward. And my officials got incredibly upset about me as I said this to a French audience who were in fact at Airbus. Anyway, moving on from my early gaffes as a minister, I don't think it particularly matters actually that we've left the European Union. The European Space Agency is not dissimilar to the European Song Contest, where actually pretty much anybody can get involved and join it. And I think that's absolutely fine. And Chris, I think, raises a very, very good point. at the end of the day, the reason people will want to get involved with the UK in terms of our space capability is because of things like, how we legislate. What are we going to do in terms of, our approach to spaceflight licensing, for example? There's some interesting thoughts about having them as environmentally, compliant with environmental and social governance, which is, I think, a very, very interesting idea, because that creates value for having a UK license. Our universities are great, but Chris, you're absolutely right. I mean, our legal system is the global standard for business law. People will come to the UK, or indeed they don't even need to come to the UK. They can use UK law wherever they are in the world, as long as they use a UK law to do it. So there's a lot of good stuff that we've got. What we've got to do is to make sure that we keep promoting all of that. We've got to have a good, strong team that's getting out there and pushing that around. And I remember about 4 years ago as a minister, I led a space mission, not literally, but it was a group of companies to go to America to go along and see what the opportunity was. And it was extraordinary how keen businesses were to come to the UK. But it comes back to that customer piece. By the way, I must just pick up, I know you said not to, Nick, but Suyesh Singh has been asking about whether an Indian space company can come to the UK and incubate and set up partnerships. Suyesh, absolutely yes, absolutely yes. And if you want any help, get in touch, with me or indeed Gary from the catapults, and he will be able to help, or I'll certainly be able to point you in the right direction. But we are really keen to help anybody who can who can bring their talents to the UK, because it's a very good destination.
And just to add there, all the launches of OneWeb, you'll see I've got an Indian flag on the side of them. We have an Indian investor, and we couldn't be more interested in the Indian Space Agency, ISRO, and indeed in their launching rockets. So it works both ways. You're very welcome, and we want to benefit from you.
Okay, that's a good bit of a love in there happening. And actually, just connected, actually, it's back to the publicity thing that we said earlier. There's a question from one of the audience here about what do we think that that the European Space Agency and the UK Space Agency can gain, the kind of how can they gain the kind of universal awareness and admiration that NASA evokes? I mean, you said you were going to the US and it's all great over the air, but here the public perception is somewhat different. How can we harness some of what NASA's got for ESA and the UK Space Agency and for the benefit of everyone? Any views? Well, go on, Chris.
I'm sorry, I should explain to everybody I'm half Irish, so I never stop talking, so you can shut me off anytime. So look, I mean, how do we do all this? Success breeds success. We all know that. When we get our first launch and our second launch and our third launch from the UK, when we're producing payloads that are on their way to Mars and delivering activity, when the group are going back to the moon and they find the sensors have been built at Harwell, those are things that make a major difference, because people want to join and be involved in things that are a success. And so that's what we need to do, flag up our successes, have our successes, and I'm sure there are people here far better qualified than me to identify some of those things.
Go on, Gary, over to you.
Interestingly, from an industry point of view, I remember talking to a reasonably large organization in the US who was quite jealous of the whole sort of ESA sort of funding and everything else. I did quietly remind them about the DoD. They were actually jealous of the fact that there was this sort of pot of funding that wasn't government focused or military focused, should I say. So they're actually quite jealous in that way. But I think coming back to what Mark was saying about, Tim Peake and the next generation of astronauts that, hopefully come from the UK and hopefully will end up on the moon. I think capitalizing on that, and having, the first ESA, lander with European astronauts there will then hopefully, I'm going to use the word catapult, which is a bit wrong, but catapult, the ESA into the same level as NASA. I guess, NASA and the lunar landing is sort of school children sort of dreams and things. So I guess, it's capturing that imagination. And when we get back there again, I think that should then hopefully, jettison, ESA into that same level.
Okay, great. We've got a couple of questions. One on financing, and and perhaps Anthony, you might want to pick up on this because you're given the stage of your company. What do you think is the role of private financing in the space sector, and how can it be increasingly involved in UK space centre? I obviously work in the world of finance myself, and involved mostly in the large infrastructure projects. OneWeb has attracted a lot of private sector investment. Looked at debt, ended up with equity, for now at least. Anthony, what's your experience, and how can the government help SMEs and the larger companies?
Yeah, so I think last year was really tough with the pandemic, and venture capital, certainly the beginning of last year, was quite dry. But since then, stock markets have been high, and so everyone's been looking at other places to put money, and space is there. It's a good alternative. I think certain people do see that it's a worthwhile investment. There can be high returns, and it's serving an essential need. So we have done very well in the last 6 months in raising funding. We're just about to complete our Series A, and got our eyes on Series B, next year. So there are funds and UK listed funds which are available, and overseas as well, especially if you're helping out with a climate challenge. So there's lots of impact investors and people looking at buildings and property technology. So you just need to build something that people want, and then the investors will come. And we've also seen opportunities for debt financing as well. And there's some government structures for that. And Nick, you know a lot more about that than I do. I would say that the government grants have really helped with seeding. Some of our investors said, if you could get this grant, then we will definitely match that, 10x. So that seed, that confidence from ESA or the UK Space Agency, who have, it gives you credibility, and it makes a huge difference. So having that seed money is paramount.
Mark, you're going to say?
Yeah, there's an awful lot to think about when it comes to the financing of all these businesses. And I think just to come back on one point that Anthony made, there is in fact only one listed investment trust, which is the Seraphim Space Fund, which is, I think, the only one in the world actually which is dedicated to space. But there are an awful lot of technology funds that do look into the kind of the wider technology area, which does include space. The key thing is the government's, so certainly saying, got to be there when it's needed, but it's got to get out of the way when it isn't. And one of the interesting problems with this is, there are a whole raft of very, very clever people with very, very good ideas. As I say, it's not just a space thing, but it's also just a technology thing, where sometimes you just need a little bit of a grant just to keep working up your idea, to get it into a marketable idea. And I think that there are plenty of funds around which are available for that type of entrepreneurial spirit. But at the end of the day, as Anthony said, the government has to reduce the risk to the investor. If it's going to cost, I don't know, let's say £100 million to get a satellite up into space, that's quite a big ask of investors, because at the end of the day, you've got to go to an awful lot of expenditure before something actually happens. And then it may not work. It may just be bad technology. It may not work. It may just get broken in the launch process. And you hope, obviously, try and mitigate that. So where you do need the government is where it's going to be able to come in to be able to de-risk it. So the government will make it easier for investors to come in. And of course, bear in mind that the government can do this through debt, so it can always get its money back at some point in the future. So essentially, you're almost invoice financing, where you're selling forward the project of or the product of the satellite and getting that money back. So therefore, you get that. That's where the government gets its money back, and that's quite helpful. But you've got to bear in mind that equally so, people shouldn't rely on the government. If their business is fundamentally no good, then it doesn't matter whether the government's going to come in or whether it's a private investor. I mean, ultimately, sometimes you just need those private investors to come along and make an investment decision. And sometimes, with the best will in the world, if it's a bad idea, perhaps it should be killed at birth. But what you really want to do is get to the situation where you have a mature marketplace where there is plenty of investable capital around, let's say, be it debt or equity or hybrids, where that money will go into, we'll understand how this works. And that's why I raised this point about the Gordon Brown type approach to the to giving tax breaks. I mean, it wouldn't cost anybody any money. And I think there is a point that some people sort of say this is a tax scandal. Actually, it's not a tax scandal. Some people have misused it for other tax avoidance schemes. But let's leave that side of it aside. At the end of the day, if you do create the right environment, you create a very, very interesting, flourishing market. None of these businesses will get off the ground, literally will get off the ground, without quite substantial amounts of cash. So you've got to create the environment, as I say, where the risk is, where it's just an unacceptable risk on a good business, can be supported by the government for repayment potentially at some point in the future. But the government must not be in the business of trying to compete against the private sector to buy the investment opportunity. The private sector needs to make investments in good things. And if the government's getting in the way, then actually it will drive away those investors. And that's not a good place to be.
Seems that is a perfect segue into Chris's response, who's taken government investment alongside private sector investment. And perhaps you can give me your views on government involvement in the sector.
Yeah, happy to do so. I mean, I think the other point to make is that in the US, they have a little thing called DARPA. And DARPA is the sort of the black box into which all the brilliant ideas go, many of which are military and some of which are not military. But DARPA is prepared to fund and develop those things. And in the UK now, we've got our own mini DARPA. And my brain fails me whether it's called, I think it's called ARIA, which is the new development scheme there. And I would hope that that will have a multiplier effect. Now, talking about OneWeb in particular, with the funding route we went down last year, it evolved. So when we started, we were looking for a COVID loan of a couple of $100 million while we went to the American banks or elsewhere and found the money. Only no one had actually written the leaflet for the COVID loan, let alone done the COVID loans at that stage. So we were a little bit premature. And Anthony, I know you'll know the experience of knocking on doors and finding that they're not ready for you yet. The process was strategic. It wasn't a vanity project. The point was that the US had Musk and the US had SpaceX to do with what they wanted to do. And the question became, does the UK want to be involved and have a global footprint in space, or doesn't it? Because if it doesn't, maybe China will buy OneWeb, maybe Canada will buy OneWeb, maybe an American group will buy OneWeb, or perish the thought, maybe the French will buy it for the EU. And all of these elements were being weighed up on what should be done, what shouldn't be done. And the underlying fact was this is going to be a strategic decision by the United Kingdom on where it's going to be over the next 15 to 20 years. Not something they normally do, but that's why NSIF was involved. That's why the whole thinking was around, what are we going to do with it? Not what is it now, it's what are we going to do with it? And so then once the decision had been made with help from BEIS, with help from UKSA, with Space Catapult, who played a huge part in working out what could be done with it, when all of those bits were in place, the Chancellor then wanted to know, how are we going to do something with it? What are we going to do with the money? Where's this all going to work? And then the realization, even if we put some money in, it's not enough money, and we don't know how to run one of these things. And it was at that point that government reached out to Sunil Bharti-Mittal, a proven technologist who delivered networks before, who also had a global financial footprint through Airtel, his company. And the two parties came together, and Sunil had been an investor in OneWeb at an earlier stage and sold out to SoftBank. And he decided that we could do this. And the two parties agreed they would make the bid. But the assumption then was he would backstop the bid. And what he said to the UK government was, all right, you put your 500 in, and I'll put my 500 in, but I want a call option for another 500 because I think this thing is going to go really well. And I will backstop you. You will not have to put any more money in. I will backstop you with another 500. And that was the bit that gave the Treasury the extra comfort over and above everything else, that here was this entrepreneur who had a proven telecom track record, who was prepared to put $1 billion of his own money into this. So that gave him the comfort. What then happened was that once that had been done and the bid had been won, well, we now had $1 billion, but we needed another $1.5 billion. But actually it's $1 billion because Sunil's got a pocketbook, but hopefully not have to use that. So then it became interesting because then SoftBank decided, well, we missed out last time, but we do so much along the way, and sometimes we win, sometimes we don't. We still think this is a good thing. And so SoftBank came back in. And when they came back in with another 450 million, Hughes then said, well, although we lost out last time, we still want to be involved in the technology and in the kit and the manufacture. We'll put 50 in. Then along came Eutelsat, and Eutelsat said, we'd like to put a very large number in. And at that point, the investors said, no, you can have 550 at a premium. And the roll then began. And then the Koreans came in because, as I said earlier, nothing interests people more than success. And at that point, when the Koreans came in, they said, we'd like to put this big number in. And they were told, that's not available. But you can have this big number, but at a premium. And so we went from, in the space of 10 months, a fully indebted 3.4 billion busted business to a no debt 2.7 billion all equity business. Now that's an extraordinary thing to do, but that's because of the global asset. And so if you then look at what it costs to build a LEO, you're talking about 5 to 7 billion to build a LEO. And the wonderful thing about Chapter 11 is that the 3.4 billion of debt that we had clocked up, all the development work, all the satellite development, all the thinking, many of the launches has gone to wherever money vanishes to when a project doesn't work. It's gone. So what I'm hoping is that OneWeb becomes a success in the UK, which makes it okay to invest in UK space. That because we are doing okay, then it has the tail effect of drawing others up because UK is good at space. That was the change.
That's great, thanks. And actually, it's a perfect way to wrap up. We've just gone over our time, so I guess I just need to thank all the panelists for their contributions. It's been really an interesting discussion on a wide variety of topics around the UK space. We didn't quite get to all the questions that you asked us. We'll certainly try to respond over the next couple of days where possible to those that we haven't managed to get to. I'd also like to thank our sponsor, Proactive International PR, we just to say that the program will be the webinar itself will be posted on the GVF website shortly, and you can watch this recording on gvf.org. So thanks again. Join us for the next webinar, which will be sponsored by SES and is on the subject of connectivity demands, satellite and the Middle East, and that's taking place next Tuesday, the 5th of October, 3 p.m. UK time and 10 a.m. Eastern. Thank you again to everyone and have a good afternoon, evening or morning.